Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is my friend Tim Marting, who is the co-founder over at Citizen Remote. And if you're unfamiliar with Citizen Remote, you won't be by the end of this conversation. They're doing some really cool stuff, trying to bring the entire experience of moving abroad into one place and streamlining everything with third-party services and tools and all the information that you need to make a move abroad. So as someone who's done this a few times, I wish that Citizen Remote had been around when I was starting to make my move abroad. But for those of you that are exploring it for the first time, I think it can be really, really helpful. Aside from that, we also get into some of the up and coming digital nomad visas that the team at Citizen Remote are seeing people take a lot of interest in, and probably those that are not getting the attention they deserve. So this conversation takes us on a trip around the world and also touches on some of Tim's personal experiences moving abroad, and just a lot of useful and practical information with a really fun guest. So I enjoyed this one, and I hope you all will as well. Please help me in welcoming Tim to About Abroad. I don't think we've ever really met for like in-depth conversation of any kind. And I totally forgot that you also have been living in Spain for a while. Did you say, is it up near Barcelona or somewhere?
Yeah, so it's just south of Barcelona, a town called Sitges, which is actually where I think our paths crossed online. You were doing that event, and I remember, I think I was on the beach, if you recall, and I was like in sunglasses, and I was trying to like mute myself because there's music in the background. But there was a lot of exciting people on that call, and I wanted to kind of see everyone. So Shout out to Chris for organizing that and you being on it.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad it brought us together, and we finally get you here on About Abroad. You're doing some very cool stuff. Obviously, am I correct to say living abroad yourself? You're not from Sitges, I don't believe.
No. Does the accent give it away?
Just a bit.
Yeah. So no, I've been living abroad since probably 2018, I think. So coming up on 6 years now. Been going outside the U.S. for majority of that, all of that time. And yeah, man, I'm in Sitges now, and I'll actually be moving. I haven't even announced this anywhere yet, but I'm going to get my MBA in Iceland, of all places.
Oh, wow.
So I'll be leaving Spain in 2 months. So,
whoa. How are you feeling about that's kind of weird, right? Like it's like the immigration from Spain. Once you've been living here long enough, it's kind of starts to feel a little bit like home. Like how are you feeling about leaving?
So where I live right now, so like I don't live in the city. I'm not a huge city guy myself, but like I walk out and it's just sunshine all the time, and there's like birds, and it's like a quiet area. I live up in the hills. And I just stand out and I'm like, well, I guess I got to say goodbye to the sun because I'm going to Iceland. But I mean, I am excited. Typically, I like to spend, like 2-3 years in each place. And I've been 3 years here in Spain. I'm definitely going to miss it. I'll definitely come back. There's still places on my bucket list that I haven't been to in Spain, like Sevilla is a big one. Bilbao is another. I've been up to San Sebastian. But I mean, I'm excited to kind of start a new adventure and, go and further my education and stuff like that. So.
Oh, that's exciting, man. That's exciting. So 3 years in Spain, and you mentioned you're out of the country since 2018. Where were you before that?
So I spent some time backpacking through like the UK, Southeast Asia and stuff like that. And then I went over to Australia for about 3 years. And then I came over to Italy with my ex at my girlfriend at the time. And she was like, I'm going to Italy. You know how things go when you're traveling abroad and stuff. And she was like, do you want to come? And I said, heck yeah. And so moved to Italy, which then led to me having to stay in Europe, with a US passport. It's a little bit difficult. So you got to find an avenue. And then that's how we ended up in Spain.
Wow. Yeah, man. That's how it happens for a lot of people, right? Like you sort of just kind of like figure it out along the way. And suddenly you find yourself living up in the hills above the Mediterranean Sea thinking like, oh, this life doesn't suck.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Just go with the flow of it.
How did you, are you a US citizen?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So born and raised in Kansas City. So right in the middle, man, as far away from a coast as possible.
that mythical coastline that they talk about growing up. That's funny. Like, how did you? No, this is the reason I'm asking these questions is because like what you do now at Citizen Remote is like totally correlates with and we're going to talk about a lot of this. But I mean, did you like and to stay as an American? Typically, to stay in Europe, you have to like go back to America and like apply through a consulate, and it's like it's a pain. It's a lot of work. You can't really normally do that from once you're already within Europe. Did you have to do that, or did you figure out some way around that and were able to be here and apply for it that way?
Yeah, so that's kind of it. So that when I got over to Europe, it was the tail end of COVID, but I mean, COVID was still kind of happening. And so the last thing that I wanted to do was leave, my girlfriend at the time and have to go back and do exactly what you just said. So I was trying to find avenues to stay and apply inside Europe. And Spain was one of the like 3 or 4 options we had at the time. And I gave her kind of the Netherlands was another one. And she was like, heck no, because she's in southern Italy. She was like, I'm not going anywhere that doesn't have beaches. And so, yeah, we moved directly to Spain, and I was able to apply. And it was because of a family reunification visa. So it was a different visa category, although you can apply in Spain on the DNV, digital nomad visa as well in Spain. But essentially, yeah, I was able to come over here and apply directly. The only thing is that I had to stay in Spain during the application. So you couldn't leave. Otherwise you forfeit the application. So I was, and I always say this in quotations, although people can't see the quotations, I was stuck in Spain for 13 months during that application process. And she was like going back to Italy the next summer and like enjoying everything. But I mean, it's not a bad place to be stuck, I guess.
Yeah. It could be worse. They have that. And I'm sure you know this, but like one of the cool things I think about the Greek digital nomad visas that like you can, just go and apply for it in Greece. And then you just, I guess, maybe it's the same with the Spain one actually, now that I'm remembering, but yeah, you can just like be there in the country. So you just arrive, apply, and then like by applying, you're kind of like granted the time to be there. And sometimes it takes like a year to complete the process. So it's like, all right, I guess
even if you don't get your visa at the end of the day, I think you got your travel time in, right? Like
exactly. Maybe even that's the best case scenario because you don't have to deal with all the bureaucracy and stuff after that. But anyway, all right, that's really cool, man. And so it's just funny how like I don't know if you always planned on getting into the helping people move abroad world, but I mean those experiences I imagine had to kind of like fuel what you've created now with Citizen Remote. Fair enough to assume that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I would never have gotten into this space. And honestly, if I had a chance to do it over again, probably wouldn't get into this space. It's a very complex space. I mean, you're dealing with, starting the business in one country is one thing, but then when you have to deal with the bureaucracy of 35 different countries and grow, like that's just complex and not fun. So, I mean, it is a blast. We're really, really passionate, our team at Citizen Remote, about what we do. And so like there is that's keeping us going. But man, it's not a fun, leisurely process in startup. That's for sure.
No, I mean, these are very complicated things in and of themselves when you talk about startups and you talk about visas, immigration, legal aspects. You inevitably touch on taxes, and you start meshing all those things together while you're living abroad and doing it all in a foreign place. I mean, yeah, you did it. You took the road less traveled, but it's turned out really sweet, dude. Like I have to say, like watching from the outside, I love the marketing and the branding and the information you guys provide is like super thorough. You're always at like the cutting edge of like what's happening with the new digital nomads that are new digital nomad visas that are coming out. And I know it's not just digital nomad visas, but it's like, that's such a popular subject right now because you have so many people that are getting access to location independent work for the first time, or even some seasoned veterans out there that are finally starting to take advantage of it. And this interest in going and spending significant amount of time abroad. And now you've got countries like literally fighting to get you through their doors. They want you to come spend that overseas money there in their country. So it's an interesting time to be in it from an opportunistic standpoint. You timed it right, but I'm sure it's, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And so just want to say, first of all, like big fan of what you're doing from the outside looking in. And then secondly, what I would love to do today, if it's cool with you, is talk about some of the more like, some of the up and coming or maybe lesser known digital nomad visas. I think a lot of people talked on this show, for example, about the Greek digital nomad visa and the Spanish digital nomad visa. We just recently did an episode on the Italian digital nomad visa. And so there's several out there that I think are like we've already covered and or people kind of already know about, but there's many more. You could probably tell us like, roughly the exact number, but there's so many more out there. And there's some countries that sort of are a little bit more off the radar that are awesome destinations to go to. So I was thinking we could dive into some of those and just kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess, one thing you said is what's the exact number of digital nomad visas? And that's kind of how you categorize a digital nomad visa, because that's something that is up for debate, I guess, at the moment as well is, there's what's the visa that's good for remote workers, and then what's the visa that's good for digital nomads, and then what's the one that's good for like an entrepreneur or a small business owner. And so there are all these kind of different ways that, as what is a digital nomad? A digital nomad is somebody who works remotely and travels. And so if you work remotely and travel, oftentimes you're an entrepreneur as well, potentially, maybe not. But if you are, then, that number of like 25 to 35 jumps up to like 65 on where you can kind of relocate. And so, and then it kind of goes into what are the tax benefits? How long can you relocate for? Is it temporary or is there a path to like citizenship? And so there is so much potential to navigate, within Europe to, South America to Southeast Asia. Obviously, Europe is kind of on the forefront of these digital nomad visas in terms of pathways to citizenship and stuff like that. But then there are a lot of complexities within Europe in these digital nomad visas as well, as you've probably covered in the previous episodes. But yeah, in terms of what's kind of up and coming, Europe's obviously huge. Everyone wants to go to Europe, especially I feel like most of the Americans and Canadians who kind of have that higher salary, they're the ones who are seeking these digital nomads. They're the ones who are most commonly eligible for these digital nomad visas. And so they're like, well, I want to go to Europe. We're both here. We get that. And so, but there is a whole heap of other digital nomad visas when it comes to like, the UAE, which is, like Dubai, Abu Dhabi.
Mm-hmm.
There's Argentina. There is South Africa just launched one, which I think will be really popular. There's Malaysia to Thailand just launched one. There are so many, and you see, I feel like every other, week, there's a new one that just came out or they announced one that came out. So, in terms of what we can dive into from that, it's endless.
It's endless. Yeah. There's so many we could get into. Well, let's break down a couple. First of all, let's start real quick with like, for someone that's listening to this for the first time and is like, wait, what is a digital nomad visa? Let's just give like the very brief description. And actually, let me back up one step further. Can you just introduce Citizen Remote really quick so that like people know where where you're coming from with this?
Yeah, of course. And I appreciate, the compliment on what we're building. It's been, 3 years in the making and we're still doing so much. So where Citizen Remote is today, we're not even like excited about internally because we can see where we're going. But yeah, so essentially what we've tried to do, with my relocation specifically, moving abroad, all the other founders are also people, US expats actually living abroad. We got one in Italy, one in Denmark. And, there's a lot that comes with relocation, as you probably know, whether it be accommodation, whether it be tax filing, whether it be acquiring a visa, or just meeting someone around you, in the local community or expats around you. And so what we've tried to do at Citizen Remote is kind of build all of that within one app. And, our emphasis is visas right now, because that's kind of our bread and butter. That's where we have, extensive content on. And so we built out this network and this application that allows you to kind of work with a legal team, depending on where you're wanting to go and kind of submit an application there. And from there, we can connect you with a tax advisor when it comes time to file your taxes. We can get you set up with accommodation. We have over like 50,000 listings through our partners. And so pretty much what Citizen Remote is I guess you can say like conglomerate of all of these different resources and, these pain points that you're probably going to experience when moving abroad. And we put that all into one application. Another thing I didn't touch on is insurance as well. That's something that we're about to launch a new version that's in our app actually, as of I think next week or 2 weeks from now. So probably by the time this is out.
Yeah, by the time this is published, that should be out. Is that through like another, like, are you starting your own insurance division, or is it like you're like referring people to good good insurance for the situation that they particularly have?
So it'll be the latter of the two, but so we've essentially kind of like white labeled it into our system. So it's essentially in the Citizen Remote app, you can go through the entire flow. You can get a quote and everything in our system. Because again, that's what we're trying to do, is get it all to where you only really need this app to just take all the steps you're going to need to do. So
that's so cool, man. God, these are the pain points. Like I recall the first time that I had to get like a real visa. I'd gone and lived abroad for different periods of time, but it was in like countries where, the visa process was kind of like facilitated for you, or it was like you just kind of show up and you just have to go do some paperwork, not really like applying to go live somewhere, right? Like you really got to like there's a chance you won't get it. So it's an extensive process. And it was just such a pain. Like I was spent so much time, doing those things. Like, okay, it says I need insurance. Like, where do I even begin? Or like, okay, it says I need a confirmed address, in a foreign place. I'm like, I've never even been there. Like, how can I have a confirmed address?
And what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah.
How
is
do
it
you
like
do that?
Is a hotel reservation for 2 nights a confirmed address? Is a 30-day Airbnb? Is it need to be a signed lease? Like so much of this stuff is really tough before you even get to the obvious like legal and tax aspects. So super cool that you put that all in one place. That there's a lot of peace of mind there. And then I think like once you start diving into the mechanics of like, okay, we need like now I need to start like actually applying for the visa. And and like figuring out which ones I'm actually eligible for. I think that's a whole nother thing. I don't know if you've come across this, but I kind of imagine you have. Like I don't know how many emails I've received from people saying something along the lines of like, hey, I want to go abroad. Like, which country should I go to? I'm like, I don't know you first. So I can't tell you that. I don't know what your interests are. Maybe start there. But secondly, there is a little bit of a paradox of choice here, because it's like, there's so many, let's just use digital nomad visas, like so many digital nomad visas and so many places you could go. And I think a lot of people are like, I just want to go somewhere cool. Like there's like 30, I'm interested in like 30 different places. Where do I even begin? And so I think this is awesome, because you can just go to Citizen Remote and find like start your search there essentially.
Yeah. And we have an eligibility quiz that we have as well. And so essentially you can put in just some basic information that that's going to say you're qualified for this or that. And you essentially get to see all of the countries and where you could potentially move and relocate to. And then we're actually, one of the updates I'm talking about, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but it's coming out soon enough anyways. So we're going to tie in the ability to associate whether you want to go to like a sunny place or a mountainous place or all of that inside the quiz as well. So you can kind of put some other data points in, and we'll filter, as well, where, what digital nomad visa and you're going to be eligible for that fits your interests. So,
so cool. I'm looking at your, this quiz that you've got. I just pulled it up over here. This is awesome.
And again, like,
so that's really cool.
You're seeing it now, and I'm just like, oh man, I wish you could see it in like a month, because we're literally updating the design of that quiz right now. It's going to be really cool. And we're updating the explore section, which is kind of where that filter and where you see all the checks and what you're eligible in each country and city. And so like all that's going to be really sleek in probably about 1 to 2 months. So I'm excited for you to check back.
It's always a work in progress, right? Like as the founder and creator, I mean, I have so many criticisms of this podcast, for example, where I'm just like, oh, we have to fix that. This is terrible. But from the outside looking in, it looks awesome. So, we're not seeing how you're making your dog food. Cool. I'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at Lexity. I've lived abroad in various countries, and one common denominator I've found is that dealing with foreign bureaucracy is a nightmare. Trying to navigate visa and immigration waters in another language is not something I'd recommend ever trying on your own, even for the most experienced of us. So when I recently had to renew my Spanish visa again, I turned it over to the pros at Lexity. They've already helped more than 5,000 expats and digital nomads find a home and thrive in countries like Portugal, or in my case, Spain, also Italy, France, and Greece. Some very desirable locations indeed. So whether you're trying to obtain your first visa abroad, purchase a property, or work through international tax issues, Lexity's team of friendly lawyers is here to simplify your journey. The team is super knowledgeable, bilingual, and thorough, and I seriously cannot recommend their services enough. My experience working with them has been incredible, and I can honestly say I don't know that I would have EU permanent residency if it wasn't for the help of the team at Lexity. So if you're ready to make your move abroad, then Lexity is offering an exclusive discount to About Abroad listeners. Grab 10% off your first service with the code AboutAbroad 2023 and learn more over at Lexity.com in the show notes and start your abroad journey today. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, let's talk about a couple specific digital nomad visas. Like you mentioned one a few minutes ago that I know literally nothing about. Let's talk about the UAE and United Arab Emirates, Dubai, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, so I know that we had agreed to talk about this, so I'm excited to kind of differentiate, what it means to have a live digital nomad visa, and then in practice, what it means to accept these digital nomad visas. Because, while countries will come out, and it's usually like a prime minister or somebody will come out and they'll say like, hey, we're now going to accept this. Well, the rest of the government now has to go and take that and implement a law and then pass that law onto the consulates, and the consulates have to understand how to process it. So just because like there is a new digital nomad visa, it doesn't mean that you can all of a sudden apply that day. Like if you saw something that's like, oh, this new digital nomad visa is out, it's like, okay, well, but no one's accepting it. The government just now heard about this at the same time you did. So there's no process in place. And so that's kind of what's going on with the UAE. You can apply for it, but it's not something that it's kind of complex in the consistency of it. And so when we're always coaching people on where to go, the one thing that we always are hesitant of is, how streamlined is this process? Like Portugal, for example, very streamlined. They're very established. They've done like thousands and thousands of visa applications for the digital nomad visas. And so with the UAE, their digital nomad visa specifically, kind of that buzzword, isn't going to be the most streamlined process. However, they do have a freelancer visa, which offers you, all of the exact same benefits of the digital nomad visa there. And so that's pretty much one of those things is like, again, be aware and maybe figure out and dive into it before just like, oh, great, I'm going to find this not necessarily sketchy, but sketchy website, click a bunch of things, pay a bunch of money and submit my application. 3 weeks later, oh no, it's denied. Yeah, because you probably didn't even submit an application to the government. Yeah. And so just things to keep in mind there. But yeah, so the freelancer visa for the UAE is going to be really good. I mean, you're going to be able to go there for 2 years with the ability to extend. You're going to be able to get, a tax ID set up. You're going to get legal residence. So in terms of what the essence of a digital nomad visa, or I guess a remote worker visa, whatever you want to call it, is, that's a really good option for the UAE, and it's really low taxes as well. You're able to actually work in the country, which most digital nomad visas don't allow you to do. And the minimum income, I think, is like $5,000. So in terms of what a digital nomad visa is, it's a great option. It's just kind of a different category of.
When you say 5,000, it's like 5,000 US dollars per month. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. That's a funny thing is, in different places around, I mean, this is kind of a little aside, but like in different places around the world, when we talk about earning money, we reference it in different ways, right? Like sometimes obviously you have different currencies. Sometimes you use annual income. Sometimes you use monthly income. Sometimes you use gross. Sometimes you use net. Like I found like in the US, we use our gross income. So if you make 100K a year, you make 100K a year, then you pay taxes on it. I have friends in other countries who are like, I make 60K a year. But that when they say that, they mean like after taxes. Yeah. So anyway, I think it's the reason I kind of point that out is because I know someone who applied for a digital nomad visa thinking they made plenty of money to do so, and they didn't, because they were looking at they thought the number listed the monthly income that they needed, and they thought it was annual. So it was like, 5,000, and they're like, oh, I make 30,000 a year. I'm good. And and then they were like, oh, I got denied because of that. And they'd put in a bunch of time and effort. So anyway, just something to reference there.
Yeah. So it's funny that we're talking about like payroll and stuff. Are you on like a bi-weekly or whatever it is payroll? Or because like I've been out of that system for so long long now that it's just so different. Like when you get paid like monthly or something like that, it's just such a funny, I don't know what yours is.
I work I work full time for a company, Doist, and I'm paid a monthly salary. So like when I'm applying for visas or whatever, it's like pretty easy to do that. That said, like, I know a lot of people who are remote workers that are essentially like full-time, like in the US, we would say like W-2 employees, but in reality, they're hired as like 1099 because they live in other countries or whatever. And it's just like, oh, we don't have the local equivalent of that, or we don't have an entity in that country. So we'll just hire you, basically as a freelancer. And that creates a lot of pain. Like when you're applying for these things, cause you're like, no, I'm a full-time employee. And they're like, no, you're not, you're a freelancer. And that means something different. And so, yeah, this can be like another, like just adds another layer, because governments aren't used to having to work with this. Like in the past, it's very simple. You're either an independent contractor hired on a contractual basis, or you're a full-time employee. There was no gray zone really. And now there is very much so a gray zone in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Well, and like, so some countries won't even allow W-2 employees unless you can produce some kind of agreement with the country saying that they're going to pay the taxes, because that's a big thing when they offer these temporary residence permits, which is kind of the second stage of these digital nomad visas. So some, like if you're a W-2 employee or full-time employee, you're not even eligible. Whereas opposed to others, like you can't be a freelancer. Like, so there's all these like weird, and it just varies so much from country to country. It's complex.
It does. Yeah. Circling back to the UAE, I mean, I think this is a really cool opportunity for people that want to go spend some time in the Middle East. And, a lot of our audience here is coming from North America, Europe, Australia, scattered around the world. I just saw something, actually, I think we had like 82 countries, people from 82 countries tuned in last month, which was kind of cool. But like, so people are coming from all over, but there's a big concentration in some of those areas that I just mentioned. And so like, if you're wanting to venture into the Middle East and spend some time in this area, we've had guests on here who have built incredible lives for themselves living in the UAE, but starting on sort of like a temporary visa. I know a lot of people will think, oh, it's super expensive, or, it's challenging to live there, or whatever the case may be. But like I said, I've met people who have gone there and built incredible lives for themselves. So I think it's something to consider if you want like a new experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like the main kicker is that you're able to actually, do business in the UAE with that kind of freelancer visa. And so there's so much opportunity. That's a growing, business region as well, like in terms of startups and stuff like that. Like if you're interested and, you have that little extra cash, it is a bit more expensive, then it's a great opportunity to kind of get your feet wet in that region.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's very cool. All right. Yeah. We had not covered that here before, so I'm glad we touched on that one. The other one that jumped out at me that you mentioned, well, one of many, but another one that jumped out to me was Malaysia, which is, we've not talked about. I think we've only talked about Malaysia once on About Abroad. We brought on my friend Lauren, who spends a good bit of her time there, and that was really, really interesting. But I actually had no idea that they had anything like a digital nomad visa. So I don't know if this is brand new or if it was just flying under the radar for me, but I think this is a super sweet place in Asia that is not maybe as, it's not as popular as somewhere like Bali or some other Southeast Asia countries, but this can be an awesome place to go spend some time and explore more of that region. So tell me a little bit about what you know about this.
Yeah. And then really quickly before I forget, the UAE, the turnaround time on that visa is like 30 days. So if you want a quick visa, it's a really great option.
Oh, that's great. That's super fast, people.
Yeah, it really is. But anyway, so Malaysia, so it's a great opportunity. So one of the things with Malaysia, it's actually just got released. So it used to be only for IT professionals making 24,000 USD a year, which is pretty low hurdle for like a US or for an income requirement. You would get it for 12 months. You could extend it for another year after that. So you get 2 years. So it's not like a great pathway to like permanent residency or long-term, citizenship, dual citizenship, but it is a great way to kind of relocate to an entrepreneurial hub, maybe network there, find, another opportunity to stay longer. That's kind of the point of a lot of these is, go get used to the country and then figure out another pathway to stay. However, they did just announce I think, last week that they're opening up the digital nomad visa to non-IT professionals. So that means, if you're a founder, CEO, or if you're a, business manager or writer or anything like that, and you make, I think the threshold is like 60,000 a year. So it's a higher threshold for non-IT professionals, but you get the same digital nomad visa. So you get it for 12 months, the option to extend. So in terms of, ease of the visa process, it's going to be one of the more streamlined processes. So it's not crazy complex. It's pretty straightforward. In terms of safety of I'm going to apply and hopefully get this, it's going to be up there. So that's kind of one thing that I always mention to people, because the last thing you want to do is, again, go through that process, pay for it, apply, and then not get it. Like, that's not fun for anyone. So I always try to recommend those that are, attainable, I guess. And so, I think it's a really good, very business friendly environment in Southeast Asia for people to kind of consider.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. Like, some of these, I don't know if this, you tell me what you think, but like, some visas there's simply a set of criteria that it's black and white. You meet these criteria, you don't. So it's not really like a question as to whether or not you're going to get it. It's more just like, you can look at it. Okay, I got to do these steps and I'll get the visa. There's others where it's more like there is a gray area and they're going to review it, and you're more like applying and there's a chance you might not get it. And I think that's worth like being aware of, just that distinction exists. and then when you're applying, like, understand, because you're going to start making a lot of decisions about what the next couple years of your life looks like. And so I tend to guide people towards those visas where it's like, you're going to start planning now for something that might happen in 6 or 12 months. And like, so you can plan ahead. I suggest you apply for these visas that are more of the former than the ones that are a bit more like of a question mark and could leave you hanging.
Exactly. I mean, and it kind of comes as well because, again, visa applications and all that stuff, it's so, I guess, fluid, like if a very popular visa category is getting a bunch of applications, well, the government will just put a stop on it or raise the restrictions without passing through new regulations. And so, like, essentially, what if, for example, Spain's digital nomad visa, if it's really, really popular and the minimum income is like, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, like 24, 5 or 6, 100 euros a month. They'll all of a sudden be like, it's actually like 3,000 now, but they won't tell anyone. They won't know. And if you're applying and you're like, all right, I meet all the requirements, but it's an overrun visa, then they're going to all of a sudden up it and no one will know besides people working with the consulates day to day. And so, like, there are things to consider in that front of, like, things change in the visa realm, because the more popular a place is, the less the country is going to be like, yeah, let's keep letting, thousands and thousands of people. It's not sustainable, to be honest. And I mean, it's totally justifiable, but it's just not something that, you being the random person are in tune with day to day.
That's right. Yeah. It's a great point, man. Like, you don't have that perspective unless you've kind of lived in this space for a little while. I think like that, like we just tend to think that the governments have the rules and they press their button and things just start working. And even though you might expect some slowness or bureaucracy or whatever, it's like, yeah, that's just how it works. I know with the digital nomad visa for Italy recently, for example, like you'd talk to people you talk to someone in Rome and they'll tell you one thing. You talk to someone in Milan, they'll tell you another thing. You talk to someone in the DC consulate and they'll tell you something completely different. And like, this is just the way that it happens. And even within that, even very established visas, like I did the non-lucrative visa in Spain, right? So I got totally different information from my consulate in DC than a friend of mine who was applying through the one in LA. Different criteria, different answers to questions. I mean, stuff that seemed very black and white was not. So it's not as, I think it's not as uniform and like clear cut as you would generally think when you first step into the space.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's quite common, for example, like Mexico, which is another country, we can assist with, they have different criteria for like a UK citizen as opposed to a citizen from California or a citizen from like Florida, like legitimately. And it comes down to the consulate level and how they process it and their processes, which doesn't really seem to make sense because the Mexican government in this example, they passed a set of laws and requirements, but then when it comes down to the consulates, they're kind of making their own rules. And that just comes down to the volume of applicants in that area and what they're seeing. And so they kind of have that autonomy to be able to adjust those levers slightly. And so, yeah, I mean, it's fun.
It's a moving target.
It's fun. Yeah. Goes back to the beginning in which I was like, if I could go back again and do this, I don't know if I would because it's just so much.
for punishment. I know. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think that about like, living abroad and moving abroad many times. I'm going like, man, why do I keep doing this to myself? Like this visa stuff is not fun. I don't want to sit in another immigration office or spend another dollar on immigration lawyers. But it's what we signed up for. And there's a lot of reward on the other side of it. You mentioned Mexico, which brings us over to Latin America. And one of the ones that's up and coming in my mind is Argentina. And I know we briefly talked about this before we got started, but I guess like, would you agree Argentina is sort of like on the rise as a digital nomad destination? And then B, do they actually have a digital nomad visa or some sort of visa like this that people can take advantage of? And I guess as part C to this question, I kind of had the impression that at least for Americans, you can kind of just like go to Argentina and stay for a long time. So I don't know if you have any perspective on that. I'm not asking you to be like the visa immigration expert for each individual visa, but that was something that was on my mind as well as we were getting started today.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know that there are a lot of, I don't know specifically Argentina off the top of my head, but I know that there are a lot of like South American countries, which as a US, you kind of have privilege to go and stay there. I think Panama, you can stay up to like 9 months or something. So it's not always that like 30 or 90 day rule. Sometimes you can stay a little bit longer. I think that Argentina is 90 days, but again, I don't know. You might know a little bit more on that. In terms of their visa, though, they do have a digital nomad visa, and it's quite unique in the sense that you can get it for 6 extendable to 12 months, and there are no taxes. So you don't have to file taxes there. So it's kind of a nice country that you can go live in 12 months and not have to worry about filing in the country, which most of the other visas in which you're getting kind of that long-term temporary residence permit, they're going to eventually, after 180 something days, they're going to make you file taxes there as well. And as you know, as a U.S. citizen, taxes are so fun abroad.
It's awesome.
And so yeah, I mean, in terms of that, it's going to be, a pretty decently straightforward process. I don't want this to sound bad in any ways, but it's a Spanish country, so they always have their fun little quirks in their bureaucracy. And so, just be aware of that. But in terms of being able to get a longer term stay somewhere and not have to pay taxes is a great option. Plus, Argentina is freaking beautiful. I mean, I haven't been there. It's on my bucket list. I've seen amazing things. I've only heard amazing things about Argentina. My father went fly fishing down there for like a month or something, and he's just blown away. And so in terms of, I think it being an up and coming digital nomad like destination, I think absolutely. They have like Buenos Aires, but then they have like the Patagonia region, all these amazing mountains and beaches. And so like, I think it's going to be a huge one, especially if they continue to kind of push these incentives, which is 12 months and no tax. That's a pretty nice incentive that I think a lot of people aren't even aware of.
I know I wasn't. Yeah. I mean, that's a massive thing. Like, because obviously the money is one thing. Like you're like, okay, I don't want to have to pay taxes in 2 different places. Generally speaking, that's not going to be the case. I know people are always worried about double taxation, but usually that's not a real thing. But the thing that I've noticed is that people really don't want to deal with it. Like as a foreigner, you're like, I'm just going to be here for 1 year. Like I don't want to register with the equivalent of the IRS in this country and figure out the forms. Like what a kind of like damper on your experience. And I know a lot of people, to be honest, like that have done that. They've moved to a foreign country for, let's say, 1 or 2 years that didn't really explicitly require them to pay taxes there. Generally it's the 183 day rule. If you're there for 183 days, you become a tax resident. But in some cases there is a big gray area. And like, as you know, there's some rules to help you navigate that space and even get around it if you meet some certain criteria. But in some cases, people have gone through the process of like trying to follow the letter of the law so deeply that they've actually like gotten themselves in trouble and or like just totally regretted it later, being like, I didn't have to do this to myself, and I did. And so anyway, we're not legal or tax advisors here. We're not going to give out like any specific advice, but just share that as some perspective that I've picked up along the way.
Oh, 100%. I think, a good rule of thumb that I've kind of done myself and then I've heard others do is like, if you want to stay in a place long term, do everything right. if you're kind of just hopping around, it's kind of up to you on how much risk you want to take. Like I always just do everything as much as possible because again, like my mobility and my visa and my status when applying to another country, like that's kind of, the most important thing to me because I would not want to get a rejection because they're like, well, why have you been in Spain for 3 years and you didn't file taxes once? Where are your tax returns in Spain? You're like, oh yeah, like that's not ideal. And so, a government, if you're applying at another, country and they see that, they're like, well, this guy's going to come here and he's not going to file for taxes. He's not going to do any of the stuff that he probably should. So like, if that's what your outlook is, then, keep that on your mind. But if your goals are, I want to go live one place for 12 months and then go back home, maybe you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. Good advice, man. And so you brought us back over to Europe, which is awesome because this is where I wanted to get to one visa in Europe that's flying under the radar. It's not being talked about. I think some of the ones that come to my mind first or that I get the most inquiries about are like Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece. Is there Croatia is pretty popular for a while. I also think a pretty good visa. Are there any others that you're seeing people coming to you guys for help with?
So, well, I don't know if there was the question of the one we planned on talking about, but one that I know that is flying under the radar is France's visa because it's not a typical digital nomad visa. It's going to be more aligned with Croatia's in the sense that you only have that initial year and then you have to either leave or, well, in Croatia's case, you must leave. But in France, you'd have to find another visa category. But it does offer you, it's the long stay visa. You can get 12 months right off the bat. And that's something that's a relatively easy one to apply for. But again, it's not that long-term pathway. So that's the only other one.
That's a great point.
Malta.
Yeah. Malta's the one I particularly wanted to get to because I was drawing a blank on it, to be honest, as we were getting to the question. I'm like, we talked about one more. Which one was it? So Malta, yes. So Malta is an awesome little island country that I think is, it's not that top tier destination that I think a lot of people think of if they're making their first trip over to Europe or something like that. But if you spend a little bit of time in Europe and you have the chance to go to Malta, it is a gorgeous place, amazing weather, super friendly people, not overrun by tourists. So you have like a very like natural, just like local feel in a lot of ways. The capital city there is like gorgeous, prototypical Mediterranean European city, cobblestone streets, and you're looking out over the beautiful sea. So it's definitely a place like it's a somewhat under the radar. I'm doing air quotes now. Place that I think a lot of people are starting to realize is a very nice destination to visit. But I don't know that a lot of people know that there's actually a digital nomad visa, so you can actually use it as your home base.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing about Malta's digital nomad visa that trips a lot of people up, especially when they're kind of relocating abroad and stuff, is there's no background check required, which sounds crazy, but that's the one thing. Like as you know, being a U.S. citizen, Australia probably doesn't have the same issues. The UK doesn't have the same issues, but as a US, to get that FBI background check while abroad is just not fun. It is just not. So,
let me mention something on that actually, because people might be thinking like, why is that a big deal? Like I'm not a criminal. I don't mind providing my background check. It's not because of that. It's because, as Tim just referenced, it can be really hard to get. So the way it works is, and for a lot of these visas, you have to apply with a federal background check. So the place you get a federal background check from is the FBI. Like you have to you have to ask the FBI for a background check. Sometimes the waiting lists for those are like a year long. And so that's like, you'll see that and you'll go, abort mission. I'm not interested. If I need the federal background check, I got to get it from the FBI, which is just a ridiculous thing. Like that you have to, like the FBI has more important things to do. Yeah. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
You have to do your fingerprints. You have to literally get like an ink rolled fingerprints thing. And
it's very archaic
via mail. Yeah. Like what?
It's wild. But I do just want to mention the reason that I think this is important to bring up. I know so many times people will get to that step and they'll see that they got to work with the FBI, that it's going to take a year, that they're going to have to go roll their fingerprints, all this stuff. There are ways around this. And so I don't know if you guys offer any assistance with this or not, but for me, what I did when I had to apply for a visa, the non-lucrative visa for Spain, we found a service that expedited our visa, our federal background background check process and got it for us in like 2 weeks. And we were able to do everything kind of like somewhat digitally. I don't recall the name of the platform or what it was, but I mean, you can do a Google search. And we were able to do everything really, really fast. It cost some money for sure, but it wasn't like crazy.
And you didn't have to do I looked for this for ages. I did many Google searches, Chase. So you're going to have to either coach me on Google search or let me know, because I could not find an alternative that didn't allow, or that would allow me to request it without having to finger roll, like do the ink finger roll.
I think I had to, if I'm not mistaken, I think we had to get like a notarized version of we had to go do the fingerprinting with a notary in place or something. This is going back like 8 years. So it's the only time I had to do that. There is also, though, in some cases, something to consider is you don't have to go to you can get the State Bureau of Investigation. Every state has an SBI that can also sometimes do this for you. And then if you're in like a major municipality, like New York or something, they may even be able to access the federal database. But the one thing you definitely almost never can do is, and I'm not telling you, you know this, Tim, but like, is you can't just get like a background check from your local police department. They'll provide that to you super fast. Yeah. But that's not gonna do much, because the government of the foreign countries like, okay, great, you weren't a criminal in your hometown, but
yeah, exactly.
Were you somewhere else? So
exactly.
Anyway, we kind of digressed there, but yeah, circling back to Malta, like this is that helps expedite the process quite a bit. That's a great point.
Absolutely. And so that's kind of one of the nice features about the Malta Digital Nomad Visa that makes it more attractive for others. We've helped plenty of people who are like, a big thing. I think we touched on this early on, is people will come and they'll be like, all right, I want to move abroad, but where? And you're like, all right, let's dive in, because there's a lot that can kind of like, what are your long-term goals? Or is it you have a quick timeline? What's, your situation in general, and then that'll point you and shift you. So like, if you're flexible, then the world's your oyster. But, if you're really adamant on one, like it might restrict you. You might have to take a long time. You might have to set things in order. And so, yeah, Malta is a great option to kind of enter into the EU, enter into Schengen quite easily. Again, it's beautiful. It's going to be in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's a growing entrepreneur area for the EU specifically, because it's kind of a crossroads between like Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. And so there's a lot of startups kind of in like the St. Julian area, which is just right in the middle of the capital. And so we were actually going to move our headquarters to Malta. We didn't end up doing it, but yeah, there's a lot of benefits, tax incentives. And so in terms of being able to kind of get a 2-year, it's only 2 years, no pathway to citizenship or long-term residency, but you can obviously switch visas, as I've said probably 1,000 times now. It's a great option to kind of get a visa, get in Europe, and not have to go through the painstaking applications of other countries in Europe.
Nice. Very cool. Man, I think this is great. Like, this is exactly what I wanted to cover today, because you guys are, if you take a really quick look at your website, you can see you've got so much information on there. I love that you do the quiz, because that'll help people narrow it down. And I think there's a lot of info already out there on some of the like more well-known digital nomad visas, but the ones we touched on today kind of like, can pique the interest in a few different areas of the world, and, just let people know that these things do exist. There's lots of options for you, and it's really about like figuring out what's right for you, and then honing in on the visas that apply to your situation. So, again, like I really love what you guys are doing. And I think I hope that the information we provided today for people is gonna, if nothing else, like set you up for success later, because you're gonna go, okay, we know that we have options. Now we can dig deeper and figure out what works best for us.
Absolutely. And it's just, it's an exciting space to be in. Obviously, step one, get a remote job, but then the world really is your oyster. All these countries are kind of realizing that they eventually have to kind of set this up the way the world's moving. Because it's kind of the new tourism to an extent. People they want to slow travel. They want to take their time. They want to really, ingrain themselves in the local culture to understand a bit more. I know that's probably something you're quite passionate about, being, an expat and somebody who moves around. And so I'm excited to see where this space goes in 10 years and see the countries that offer, equivalent visas. And yeah, man, it's cool.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Well, you guys keep up the awesome work, and thanks for sharing some of the wisdom that you've learned along the way with us today. Before we sign off, where can people go to learn more about Citizen Remote, connect with you, follow along? We'll place all of these links in the show notes so people can go and check you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Citizenremote.com is the best way to do it. It's not remote citizen. I know that's probably going to confuse people now, but like it's citizenremote.com. So, from there, we do have an app and a community. We just actually hit 14,000 today.
Wow.
So exciting to see that. We are working on like getting kind of community managers because there's not a whole lot of engagement within the app, but we're excited to see that, we're getting a lot of downloads each day. And so we're excited to kind of, once we tie down all of the pain points, as we've been discussing throughout this episode, tax, visas, accommodation, and all that stuff, then we'll kind of shift our attention back to community. So we're really excited to get back and dive into that because there is, people seem interested to be able to kind of go there, message us and chat and ask, others in the community about how their experiences were with certain visas and stuff like that. So there's a lot of benefits to that. So you can download the app or the web app all through citizenremote.com. And that's kind of, get visa services, tax, accommodation. I'm a great salesman if you can't tell.
Yeah, man. I think you nailed it because you're not salesy at all. So, yeah, that's that link will be in the show notes. Go check them out. Join the community. If you're got some initial questions about moving abroad, there's tons of information there. So I don't think people will be disappointed. Tim, man, thank you so much. Safe travels. Good luck with the move to Iceland. And keep up the awesome work. It's super fun to follow along from the outside looking in. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are having some success.
Dude, it was a pleasure, Chase. I appreciate so much you invite me on the podcast, man. I know we've been trying to do it forever. So it was a fantastic conversation. Keep it going. And I know we didn't dive into as much about you as I'd wanted to, but hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. People are tired of hearing about me. They're here to listen to you. So we didn't want to bore you guys with more information about my life. Appreciate you, Tim. We'll catch up soon, man.
Yeah, man. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed. Or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.